can't see myself either. So,
Do you have a little thing over your camera, maybe?
oh, yes, I do. That would be
There we go. I love it.
hello.
Hello.
Hi. Perfect. Okay, well, look at that. That was a real like team effort and bang on time for 4 o'clock. So what more could we ask for, really? How are you both doing, Jen and Ellen?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Good, excited.
Good. Love this energy. Yes, we're excited as well. Ellen, I don't know about you, but it's kind of cold in the UK today. This is my third combination of jumpers that I'm wearing for this webinar. So sadly, the people attending will never get to see the other two combinations, but I'm actually wearing a cardigan underneath this jumper. So like winter has finally arrived in the UK and I feel quite sad about it. I feel like summer's officially over. But I heard that in the US it's still quite warm.
Well, in New York, it got cold as of last week. I felt like we had a couple days of fall, if you will, but fall is very short-lived in upstate New York. So it's basically summer and then winter. So it's getting chilly already here. Already chilly enough for me, at least.
Right, chilly enough, exactly. Also, I feel like I kind of lean into the autumn a little bit. I quite like the frosty days and the bonfires and everything, but I don't like it when it's wet and windy, which is pretty much 80% of the time in the UK.
I know it's not a big thing in the UK, but a pumpkin coffee here in the US is like one of the best things you could ask for during the fall, in my humble opinion.
Pumpkin spice latte, you mean?
Honestly, just a pumpkin coffee. There are so many options.
There's so many
flavored
variations.
things. You can just really live your dream any which way you want.
You live your best life.
It's true.
It's true. Okay, well, I think I've yet to try one of those. I think I need to stop being so skeptical and just lean into the anything that's not a flat white, which is my basic regular order. Very unimaginative. Cool. Well, I can see that people are starting to join. The attendee count is going up. For those of you who joined early, lucky you got to listen to some of our AV issues and me and Paige just sort of talking to each other for a couple of minutes. But I think we are starting to get people joining now. So we could probably kick off with just going through the agenda, a couple of introductions. We've got quite a lot to fit in today. So we definitely don't want to be rushing through this conversation because I, for one, am very excited about this particular topic and super excited to have Jen and Ellen here to share, your personal insights, which I think is infinitely more valuable than me and Paige just being here. No offense, Paige, talking about the official side of things. So we've got a nice combination today. In terms of the agenda itself, we're going to be starting with the introductions, as I mentioned, just so you can all get to know everyone on the panel. Then I'm going to be walking through some of the key takeaways from our recent Student Insights report and really digging into some of the key facts and figures that we pulled out from that survey. And then this will be followed by a panel discussion, which is going to be chaired by the wonderful Paige from our CS team, where we're going to dig into these themes of authenticity and personalization in a bit more detail. And then this will be our chance to get to know a bit more about how Jen and Ellen are tackling things at their institutions as well. And of course, we will make sure that there is some time at the end for the audience questions. So please do have a think and have your questions ready, all of you out there in the audience group. We love an interactive Q&A session, and this is a great opportunity to get your questions answered by two people who are really actively tapping into this topic and really zoning in on it at their institutions. And of course, before we jump to our introductions, a huge welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us for this session today. I know we have lots of people from institutions all around the world, and it's such a privilege for me every time I get this opportunity to get back out in front of, the public, let's say. I get let out of my sort of uni buddy day-to-day role and I get unleashed onto, unfortunately, all of you to host these webinars and host these discussions. So really excited to have you all with us today, and hopefully this is going to be a great discussion. So I'm going to really quickly introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Downs, and I'm currently our Director for Customer Success for the rest of the world, which essentially is every country outside of North America. Actually, before I took this role, I was the same role, but for North America. So collectively have covered the whole globe and feel very fortunate to work with so many of our Unibuddy partners around the world. There's over 600 of them now. And I work really closely with Paige and the wonderful CSM team to take care of all of those relationships. So really excited to be here. Before joining Unibuddy was also in higher ed. So this is a subject very close to my heart, and I can still remember all the work that we did around this at my institution. So I'm going to popcorn over to Paige, and then we can go to our speakers.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for letting me hang out with you all today. I'm super excited to be doing the panel discussion with Jen and Ellen later. But like Emily, your name is Amy, not Emily. Where did I get that? Jeez. I've known Amy for 3 years now, and I just called her Emily. That's great. Like Amy just referred to, I am a senior customer success manager on our customer success team here in the US. I'm very excited to be here with you. Before Unibuddy, I did also work in higher education. I worked at a both large public institution in California and a smaller liberal arts college in Oregon. So it was really nice kind of combination of experiences that I've had in the past. But I've been at Unibuddy, like I said, for about 3 years now, and I absolutely love working with our partners day to day. It's so fun to be able to glean insights and things like that from you all. So very excited to be here. I'm going to popcorn it over to Jen, who's also in the state of New York. So let's just share the New York love there.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very glad to be here and be a part of this today. My name is Jen Catalano. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Assistant Director for Visit Experiences at Binghamton University. And again, we are in upstate New York, so getting the nice chilly fall weather we were just chatting about. I'm also an alumni, so I've been with Binghamton for quite some time now. And we launched Unibuddy in January of 21, so it's been very exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. And I always fancied myself as an Emily anyway, Paige. So, you know, it was the name I almost had, but never did. And finally, Ellen.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ellen. I work at the University of Sussex in the UK. I manage our student ambassador program within the student recruitment team. And we started up with Unibuddy back in 2020. And yeah, really excited to be on the panel today.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, so I think we're now ready to get going with our presentation. So, as I mentioned in this first part, I'm going to kick things off just by diving into some of our general market insights. As I mentioned, we recently got the responses back from our annual Student Pulse survey, and this has really been taking a look at trends and preferences among Gen Z, that generation I think that we're all so focused on and constantly trying to understand how best to communicate with. And really for us, this survey focused specifically on their admissions journey. So more than 1,200 students responded to this survey. So it's a pretty meaty data set. And in this first section of the presentation, I'm going to be sharing some of the key things that we learned from them. So off the bat, what we found is that the majority are interested in speaking to somebody who's been in their shoes at some point in their admissions or decision-making journey. And in fact, an impressive 92% said that speaking to current students would be beneficial at some point in their decision-making journey. And I think for all of us here, that's probably not hugely surprising, right? I mean, we know that this generation is all about authenticity. They really look past a lot of the glossy brochures and the traditional marketing methods to seek out those real insights and the kind of information that will actually influence their decision by way of pathos versus just by a logo. So we also found one major don't from our data, and this is that students are outright disinterested in mass messaging or any type of sort of mass communication. So much so that anything that feels under-personalized or mass marketed to them is just going to be labeled as spam. Really, what they want is that personalization. They're looking for that communication and that conversation style that's really tailored to them and feels that it's customized to their unique journey and also their unique circumstances that they're experiencing every day. And so I think it's probably fair to say that authenticity and personalization really are the critical sort of cornerstones of a successful recruitment strategy. And in the next few slides, I'm going to be exploring what else the data tells us and how hopefully this will help you to leverage this information to optimize your recruitment efforts at all of your institutions around the world. So starting off with this first slide, which really looks at the opportunity that you have to achieve your recruitment goals more efficiently and more predictably, which I'm sure for many people here is music to your ears, because I think everybody is under pressure, I think in so many situations at the moment, to do things sort of efficiently. And also we're all being pushed a bit to do a bit more with less. So interestingly, what the first stat shows us is that students aren't really prioritizing specific channels over others. And when we actually ask them which outreach methods are ineffective and which are authentic, many of the answers actually overlapped, which is very confusing. So email, for example, a classic choice, was a top answer for both questions from students. And this poses the question, I think, for all of us, which is, how can something technically be ineffective, but also seen as authentic by students? And what this, I think, really tells us is that it's the message that you're sending that matters so much more than the channel that you're sending it on or sending it through. And I think, again, here, the personalization element is so key, because I think if you can become more effective and more predictable in your outreach and really understand what students are thinking about and what they want to be spoken to about, then you can focus on sending the right message at the right time and create that feeling of personalization, that feeling of customization to each specific student. What Stat 2 tells us is that students are still sticking with your website. The website remains the top place where they're searching and seeking out that information about you and your courses, and also about the student experience. And this is even ahead of social media channels. So it's really crucial to have that information that they're seeking right at the front and center of your website. As we all know, I think I personally know, with every year, the human attention span is shrinking. I personally can't get through watching one episode of one TV show without also being on my phone and browsing through Vinted or social media, whilst also holding a conversation with my partner and barely paying attention to the show that we're apparently completely invested in. So we know that the attention span is shrinking. And I think what we especially know about Gen Z is that they do not like to search for things. They do not like to have to work too hard. I know I don't either, and I'm definitely not young enough to be in Gen Z. And so what you want them to do is really identify you as the right fit before they get frustrated and then abandon their search altogether when they can't find the information that they're looking for. Predicting what their needs are really helps you to strengthen your ability to actually predict your funnel and give them the information that they're looking for at the right time. So the final stat on this slide, Stat 3, actually really supports Stat 2. Because when students visit your website for the first time, what they're really searching for first and foremost is those academics and major and course offerings. So all of that information that's wrapped up into the studying experience. And then they're also looking for, of course, the cost and financial aid information after that. So if you already kind of know this is what they're looking for, this is their priority, then you can start to prepare how you position and get that information in front of them as quickly and as easily as possible to grab their attention and engage them at all the right moments as well. So once you have a good idea about what your students need and what kind of information they're looking for, it's also time to think about how to engage with them. Because I think, as we would all agree, providing a sort of engaging experience throughout the whole student journey from start to finish is really crucial, and can have such an impact on how a student perceives your university, your brand, and the kind of personality of the university. Because every university or institution has its own personality, its own sort of flavor, and you really want students to get a sense of that as quickly and early in the decision-making journey as you can. So the 3 stats that we have on this page are really interesting and all relate to this. And stat 1 really reinforces something that we probably already know deep down. In fact, maybe not deep down. I think we just all know this straight up, that mobile is king for Generation Z. And so 90% of our Gen Z students actually responded to the survey on a phone or a tablet. And what does this tell us? Well, that an engaging experience really encompasses all parts of the interactions that you're providing. And that really spans across your communications, your virtual events, and your peer-to-peer communications. It's all happening on mobile most of the time. And so your content and everything you're putting out there really needs to be in line and formatted accordingly so that it's easy to look at, easy to navigate. And again, we don't get any frustrated students dropping out or dropping off because they can't find the information that they need. What we also discovered through this survey is that students really want to access current students as well to get that human perspective of your institution, because they don't believe everything they hear in advertising or everything that they read online, especially this generation. They really seem to cut through a lot of that. And so that's where a real conversation can be really necessary and really powerful to give them that authentic view. And for additional context, if we look at how this breaks down throughout the student decision-making journey, we find that it's most beneficial. Well, 45% said that it was most beneficial while narrowing down their list of schools to apply to. So when they're actually making that decision about where they are going to apply and commit, then 40% when they're making a final decision, 39% while actually researching a course or program or university, 36% during that period, that really crucial period between enrollment and orientation, where you're trying to keep those connections strong and really help students get excited about your institution and actually arriving and starting their classes. And then 30% while actually writing the application themselves. And then the final stat on this page is really interesting also, because what it shows us is that this generation is open to adapting. They won't necessarily shy away from new tools as long as they can see that there's value in adopting them. And if a new communication tool would help them make a more informed decision during their higher education journey, then 69% said they would be open to using it. I will apologize right now because I thought it would be typical. My cat came in and meowed at the exact moment I was presenting this to you. Of course, that's happened. So I'm hoping that he's now going to be quiet. Apologies if that meow interrupted any of the stats I was reporting on. And then just moving on to the next slide, what this leads us to is this latter phase of the student journey. So the portion when retention really is your primary focus. So when you're really looking to double down on those relationships and keeping those students at your university, helping them stay, helping them succeed, which, as we know, is such a huge priority and big focus for institutions all around the world. And before students can settle in on campus and succeed, they really have to first feel comfortable about the institution and about the concept or even the idea of arriving and making a life at your institution. And Gen Z students identified making friends as their top concern before arriving on campus. And this really gives us the evidence that, I guess, social acceptance in this generation actually outweighs fears about academic achievement, fears about adapting to a new environment. And I have to say, this stat did make me feel quite sad, because I think for a generation of young people who are so connected in so many ways, it's quite sad to hear that actually making friends and kind of sort of loneliness is their biggest concern. And it's definitely not something that, we should shy away from when looking on how to make those connections stronger. So students not only gave insight into their fears in our survey, but they also told us the best ways that these could be alleviated. And not surprisingly, more than half of them said that connecting with fellow incoming students before arrival in some way, shape, or form could make the world of difference to how they feel and their sentiment about enrolling at a new institution. And this proves to be a challenge for students today, because even though they have all of these different platforms and social media channels, there are so many ways that they can connect, an unlimited number of social networks. But those chat platforms really disperse those conversations and introduce a layer of uncertainty about exactly who they're speaking to, the trustworthiness of the information, and so on and so forth. And finally, on this slide, as you can see in stat 3, there's also a smaller subset of Gen Z survey respondents who noted that actually making the right choice in general about their institution or their major was a big fear for them. And the context shared here was that they just weren't really sure if they were being duped, was the word that many of them mentioned during their search journey, which is really interesting, with all of the advertisements and the official marketing and the really sort of glossy surface level marketing that they receive. They were quite wary of the image this actually portrayed, and a bit worried that the reality might not actually match up to what they were reading or experiencing in these marketing materials. And this is a particularly valid concern, especially if they're not given the chance to hear from someone or anyone who's been there before, who can kind of speak about the real deal and the real experience day to day. So once again, I think one of the big themes that came through from students at every part of the survey was this need for authenticity and this quest, I suppose, for the truth and for something really transparent and honest as well. So lastly, last slide from me, but hopefully this one is pretty interesting to everyone here. We also had received some data through the survey that may help many of you get a leg up on your competition. So I can hear all your ears pricking up as we get to this slide. Because earlier this year, we also commissioned another survey. This was separate to the student-focused one. And this one focused on nearly 800 higher education admissions, recruitment and marketing professionals from all around the world, many different institutions, different size, different focus, to really understand what they're thinking, doing, and planning this year. Obviously, there's been so much change over the past couple of years. We're all still recovering, I think, in many ways, and finding a way forwards in a post-COVID world. I haven't used that phrase in a while. But, I'd say we're still not working in normal circumstances, and we're still kind of putting the pieces back together and thinking about what we're going to be doing in the years to come. And through comparing the responses from these admissions professionals with the student responses in this survey, we noticed a really clear sort of disconnect between these two groups. Because as we know, students have a real plethora of options when it comes to life after higher education and after high school. And not all competition for their attention is coming from inside the world of higher ed. I'm sure we can all relate to this, because during the application process, they're looking at all of their options for careers and extended learning. So it's really not necessarily a surprise that 43% of admissions professionals actually stated that the greatest obstacle to staying connected with students was just keeping their interest in general, while everyone else was trying to steal it away. So when they're being pulled in hundreds of different directions and making lots of different decisions and considering lots of different options and pathways, how do you actually captivate them and keep them excited and engaged with your story and your institution in comparison with other competitors or even completely different providers that may be offering a separate pathway? I think despite obviously universities understanding what they're up against, 1 in 5 students never feels represented in university advertising either. And this is taken from a relatively recent Student Hut survey report. And this may come as a surprise because, a lot of institutions are doing fantastic work with DEI and there's a huge commitment to this. But it's a huge factor, I think, to consider and just to sit with, that so many students look at advertising and look at traditional communication methods and don't necessarily see themselves in that or reflect or connect with it in the right ways. So what is the solution to all of this? Well, I think our take, and certainly some of the key takeaways from the survey, was that the authenticity, the personalization, and really connecting students with people who can provide them with both of these things, a combination of authenticity and something personal, something customized to them. This is a really critical issue to resolve, because I don't think this generation is really going to settle for anything less. They have conviction, they know what they want, they know who they are. I personally wish I was more like that. As a millennial, I feel kind of ashamed and jealous of their sense of self. But they're not going to settle for less. They know exactly what they want and they know how they like to be communicated with. And you really can build that bridge and gain a competitive advantage when your institution is able to earn students' trust, really through meaningful and accessible connections. Because students are particularly interested in hearing from other people, others like them who have been through the experience, others at your institution, people in your team, anyone who can offer advice and insight and tips that feel real, feel relatable, and are easily accessible for students as well. And there's definitely momentum and I think movement in the right direction across the world, because 84% of institutions around the world do have some kind of formalized ambassador program. So groups of students, student representatives, they have students available that they can work with for something like this. And so their foundation is really there for sustaining their attention and also standing out from the competition. So thank you for listening to me waffle on there for a good while. Appreciate your patience and hope that there was some useful insights there. But what I'm going to do now is actually hand over to our real experts on the call, to Jen and Ellen. And before we jump into the panel discussion, it would be great from each of you to hear a little bit more about how you're currently approaching the authenticity and personalization theme at your institution. And then Paige is going to take us away with the discussion. So Ellen, we're starting with you.
Yeah, perfect. So obviously there's quite a lot on that slide. So just to focus on a couple of areas, both areas revolving really around centering students, current students, student ambassadors, in my experience. Firstly, centering them when it comes to interacting with prospective students. So I had mentioned to Amy and Paige in previous discussions that my initial role at Sussex was giving talks to school-age students, and I'd often give them a talk, open up to questions at the end, and just be met with complete silence. Sometimes they would wander down shyly to the bottom, they'd ask a quiet, really, really quiet, little bit shy question to me. They call me miss or ma'am and make me feel very old. But of course, I would answer their question. But what would happen after that is I'd send them off on usually a campus tour with student ambassadors, and they would come back and they'd be so alive with questions. And the student ambassadors would be saying how, interactive they were, how many questions they had. And it just taught me really early on how important it is for those prospective school age students to be able to talk to people around their own age, and especially in that kind of more quiet, anonymous-ish environment, like on something like Unibuddy. They feel like they can ask questions they may be a bit embarrassed to ask, or they maybe feel like, aren't clever questions or things they should already know. It just gives them that confidence. Whereas when they talk to staff, I think there's still that level of intimidation, but also they feel like those conversations are going to, by their nature, lack authenticity and lack trustworthiness. So I think that's a big area that we've tried to focus on. And then secondly, because our student ambassadors are so close in age to the students that we're marketing to, it's made a lot of sense to us to bring them into kind of backstage decision-making process as well. So our marketing and publications teams will involve them when they are coming up with branding, when they are coming up with social media campaigns, social media takeovers, that kind of thing. And we also recently involved them when we were working on a new events app as well, just to find out what would actually be useful to them, what wouldn't, and also make sure we didn't enter into any kind of, cringe territory or, non-authentic territory as well. So that's really the two major ways we've started to use student ambassadors over the past couple of years.
Thank you so much. I love that. And your last point, I think, is just so smart and so easy to do when you have this pool of students working with you closely who you can consult and who can actually actively kind of feed into your marketing approaches and methods. I mean, I know before I worked at Unibuddy, I used to manage student ambassadors at my university, and they had so many ideas. We used to show them the prospectuses. We used to talk through some of our strategies, and they were so willing to share their feedback. And you're right, I think it can help to avoid those cringy moments. We've all fallen prey to them. I feel like a grandma when I go on my TikTok and my sister's rolling her eyes at me because I can barely work my own feed. So it's helpful to have those insights sometimes, for sure. So thank you, Ellen. And Jen, let's move over to your slide. There we go.
Yes. So something that I want to talk about a little bit more is in terms of, in order to personalize, we need to connect with these students. It's impossible to personalize content if we don't have any information from these prospective students that we're trying to target and reach. So the big thing is, promoting the university, whether that's social media, whether that's creating a presence, but also being able to connect with these students. So whether it's the social takeovers where you ask them to send in questions and be involved, or it's one-on-one appointments with admissions staff or Unibuddy ambassadors or any other students that you can leverage to have one-on-one personal appointments. And then of course, any feedback that you can do through surveys or virtual events. Anytime that you can pull information from the student, you're going to want to do so. Because as Amy was saying, Generation Z expects this personalization, but they also expect the personalization to continue to update with them the more that they interact with our institution. So we need to continually be updating their file based on their interactions with us, and then ultimately using that information to target them authentically and personally. So for example, one of the ways that we do that will be through email segmentation, which we of course want to avoid mass emails at all costs. But if I have a survey result that tells me that this student is interested in studying psychology, now I can send them a crafted email that goes a little bit more in depth about our psychology program, probably an email even written by a current student from that perspective, and reach them in that way. So you kind of have to get creative, but there's ways to do it.
I love that. And it's so interesting you say that, because I think we've seen so many of our current partners do that type of personalization around programs, and it's it's not super detailed, but it still makes people feel seen. It makes them feel, oh, this university has picked up on my interest in this area. And I think you're so right, Jen, that when it comes from a current student, even if it's just positioned in the first person, and it has a picture of them and a bit of information about them, and even maybe a CTA, like to speak with them after they've opened that campaign or read that email, it just makes it feel a bit more real. It makes it feel more human, and it just, you know, steps slightly to the side of those traditional big mass emails that just sort of say, hi, name, here's a program, do you want to read about it? So I love that. And I absolutely agree. I loved your point about evolving with the students, because it's absolutely true. Personalization is not just a tick box at the beginning. It's really something that evolves organically as you get to know that student more, and as they get to know the institution more. Naturally, you want them to feel like they're getting closer and closer to your community and your university network. And so you want them to feel that really all the way through. I love that point. Thank you both. So now we're going to launch into the meat of this meeting, or this webinar, which is our Q&A hosted by the fabulous Paige. So Paige, I know we've got some questions that we're going to talk through with Ellen and Jen, but we're also going to open the floor to the audience. So please do use the Q&A, everybody, to share your questions, anything you'd like to ask Jen and Ellen about. And of course, anything, you know, Unibuddy related, feel free to direct it at Paige and myself, and we'll do our best to answer. But Paige, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. I appreciate it. And Jen, Ellen, I'm super excited to be asking you some questions. I'm going to do my best to kind of relate them to the things that you already talked about a little bit so we can dive further into them. But like Amy said, y'all, please feel free to utilize that Q&A section. If there are burning questions that you have for either of our lovely panelists, we would love to hear from you as well. So for our first question, Jen, I'm gonna ask you first, and then Ellen, if you can come in after with some insights as well, that would be fabulous. Jen, what does authenticity and personalization mean to maybe you specifically, and then also Binghamton as an institution?
To me, I think it means engagement. It means putting in a little bit of thought, or showing that a little bit of thought and effort was put towards something. So for example, those mass emails we were talking about, I don't really feel any thought. I don't really feel any consideration in those. Whereas you put a little bit of time into personalization and authenticity when it comes to the messages students are getting, or a note that we send them. And it kind of brings you back to that feeling, that pathos, which I think is really important. And I think a lot of what authenticity and personalization does is the pathos side of things. It's the feeling side of things. And, you know, Generation Z has proven more and more, we're people, we're authentic, we want to be honest. And that's really what they're looking for. And then I'm sorry, there was a second part of that question.
Well, I think you answered it really well, because it's what it means to you and also to your institution. And I feel like you covered both of those things, unless you have something else you want to add on top of that.
Yeah, no, I think it's the same in terms of the way that Binghamton perceives it as well, because it is extra time and effort that has to be dedicated to being personalized and being authentic with students.
And you know, one thing I've been reflecting on as we all have kind of been talking is the fact that Gen Z probably knows, right, that like if you're sending out that psychology email to a student who's interested in psychology, they know that like you didn't handcraft that email and send it individually to them, but kind of what you were saying, right, that like they recognize that there was time and effort put into the thought behind the email. So it's like, I think it's good for us to recognize that we don't have to spend time individually emailing every single student for them to feel like it's personalized, but recognizing that we have that data, and when we can use that data to back up this type of personalization, it's something that will be really appreciated. Ellen, what about you? How do you feel about Sussex and their approach to personalization, and also your own approach to that as well?
Yeah, so I'd completely agree with Jen in that the personalization requires just so much thoughtfulness. Obviously, just as Amy said, it goes much beyond just having a little "Hi Ellen" at the top of your email. I think at Sussex, you know, there's been a big focus not only on the communications, but also on our website, which has been going through many layers of improvement at the moment, and trying to make sure that the different areas that are subject specific, you know, are areas where they can get personalized information, and they can click through into areas that are more and more specific to them. So it would be in terms of communication and the online space as well. And then in terms of authenticity, I mean, I personally think it's so easy to overthink authenticity, especially it's sort of by its very nature, it has to be sort of spontaneous, because if I go onto TikTok now and I'm like, okay, guys, there's this really cool trend, let's do that. It's just by its very nature, it's probably going to fall flat on its face, because it's not something I've come across organically. It's not something I'm doing because I think it will be fun or interesting. It's something I'm doing because I think this will tickle some algorithm somewhere and get all these students interested. So I think it's very, very easy to overthink, very, very easy to get wrong. And the simplest way to do it is almost entirely hand it over to the people who are authentic by their nature, because they come from that group. And I think that's what Sussex has been trying to do more and more in all the different departments as well.
I love that. And Ellen, while you were talking about the kind of addition of students to more strategic conversations at Sussex, I was wondering, just from a planning perspective, when you did that, did you get any pushback about adding the students to those conversations? If so, how did you deal with that? And if not, do you think that there was a way that you approached it that made it palatable to maybe folks higher up who are a little nervous about adding students to those types of conversations?
I think it can definitely be nerve-wracking to give students the reins on all sorts of stuff, because people get nervous. They don't know what they're going to do when they've got that power. I'd say actually, rather than having difficulty convincing people to involve the students more what I find is difficulty getting them to take on the student suggestions when they're given them. Because I mean, I'm completely guilty of it too. You think, oh, I know what they're going to want. I know what they'll be interested in. And then you do the focus group or you do the survey and you're like, oh, okay, I thought maybe you'd want like this instead. And I find that not just I'm guilty of it, but a lot of people are guilty of it, where they kind of think like, well, we already kind of had a direction and we just wanted you to confirm that that was the correct direction. We didn't want you to come up with all these new ideas and tell us that we had to go straight back from scratch. Because just like teenagers, they can be, when they're at university level, very brutally honest when they think something is bad or not good or cringe, and they will tell you to your face. And I think, I mean, I don't have some like wonderful answer about like how this is how you get people to bring their walls down and accept all those suggestions. But I think that the more we involve them and the earlier we involve them as well, so we don't get so far in a campaign before we get current students coming in and telling us like, no, this is really bad, makes it much easier. So involving them from the start is kind of what I'm pushing for more at the moment.
Yeah. I love that. And I think consistency, right? That's what you alluded to as well, where it's like, if they're in there from the start and they say from the start that this is a cringy thing that we shouldn't be doing, then you're not going to feel as like, oh gosh, we have to redo all of this work if you just listen to the students at the start, which exactly. I love. We did get a question from the audience, so I'm going to go ahead and ask both of you this. So it says, any suggestions for authentic communications when it comes to entirely new programs, new curriculum, new pre-college program, etc.? User-generated content isn't really possible if no one has experienced that program before. So Jen, you're nodding. I'm going to shoot that over to you. How do you feel about that?
Yes. So this is a great question. So I was trying to think about it from the standpoint of how do we be authentic about something when you don't have students to speak of it? So what can you utilize at this point? Show them what kind of classrooms. Oh, I'm sorry. My essential diffuser is coming through. So I look a little smoky. There's no fire. Anyway, so show them what kind of classrooms or spaces they might be utilizing, what kind of technology they'll be able to utilize with this new program. So for example, for some programs, it might be a lot more impressive looking than others, but they all will have some type of resources or something that these students will want to take advantage of. The other thing is you can have faculty speak to these new programs, even if it's just a 30-second clip of them just talking about why they're passionate about what they teach and what they're going to be teaching. And then the other big thought that popped into my head with this question is Generation Z wants to know what's in it for me. That's across everything. Generation Z wants to know what they're getting out of something. So at a point where something is entirely new that you're trying to promote to them, I think a really good angle could be informing them, what can they earn from this new program? What kind of skills are they going to get? What type of internship opportunities will it lead to? What future goals or future end games is this degree going to be able to get this student? So if you come at it from that angle, I think you can start to build a lot of content, even though you don't have students to lean on.
I love that. Those are all fantastic insights. Ellen, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Mainly just that I should have spoken to Jen earlier, because we had a really prominent example of this very recently, which was that we had created a hub on our website where all the subjects were listed. Each subject had a 2-minute video with a student. They had their Unibody profile next to them. It was like this whole little crafted hub. And we could not find a student to represent liberal arts because it was a new degree for us. And also another challenge with that was that I believe liberal arts is more of a degree in the US, but it's not really a degree in the UK. So not only was it new to us, a lot of UK students didn't even know what it was. So we definitely lent into sort of talking about facilities. We had academics, tried to get the academics that were the most engaging sort of speaking, but definitely could have used that advice as well about having stuff that's more leaning on what's in it for them from that degree, especially as so many of them did not know what that degree was. But it's definitely an issue that we've had quite recently, actually.
I love that. Awesome. Wow. I have a couple more questions for you all, but I know that we are getting towards the end of the webinar. So Amy, do you think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions?
I think we definitely do. Yeah, go
okay,
for it.
Great. Love it, because you two are both just fascinating humans to talk to. So I'm very excited to even continue. This is a bit of like a kind of forward thinking type of question with our relationships with students at the institutions that we work with. How would you both currently describe the relationship that your university has with your students? And do you see room for improvement within that relationship? So, Ellen, I'm going to toss it over to you this time to answer first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say at Sussex, and obviously I'm probably a bit biased, I'd say that generally speaking, it's a really warm and friendly campus. And I like to believe that the staff and the students' relationships are really good. That said, I do know that post-COVID in particular, there was a bit of hostility because, naturally students are paying a lot of money to study and they didn't feel like they got the most out of that experience. And I do feel like that was something that was really difficult to navigate, because obviously as staff and working in recruitment, we don't really have a say on where a lot of the big decisions are made about things. And so you're trying to be empathetic while it's still getting across that you can't make big changes on their behalf. So I would say that generally speaking, I do think that the relationships that we have with our students are really, really positive. But I think that a universal issue has been the thing around COVID. And I think that also a lot of students coming in now who weren't here when COVID was peaking, but were struggling at home, being homeschooled and having Zoom lessons. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of kind of a lot of mistrust as well. And so that's something that we're trying to kind of navigate as much as possible. So
that's so real. And I'm sure that resonates with a lot of the folks that are here in this webinar as well. Jen, what about you?
Yeah, so I think Binghamton University has a really unique relationship with our students. There's definitely, so students right now are really, they're scared, they're nervous, and they need us, quite frankly. In terms of like our admissions office at Binghamton, we're extremely accessible. We tell students to call us. We try to answer the phone every time a call comes through to actually connect with students. And then I think that goes beyond to our professors and our faculty. Once students are actually current students here, we want to see them succeed. Their success is ultimately the success of the university. In terms of areas of improvement, I think that actually plays back into who Generation Z is and what Generation Z wants. So this is going to change over time, but Generation Z, for example, is very big on social justice. They're very big on be straight with me, tell me like it is. And I think if a university is releasing statements about occurrences in the world or sharing their viewpoint on certain things and the stance of the university. Things like that can be extremely important. Generation Z wants you to acknowledge what's going on in the world. We gotta say something about it. And they want to know, what does their school think? What does their school care about? So that's one of the ways I think schools can continue to improve our relationship with our students. We just have to keep thinking, what does Generation Z want from us and how can we keep helping them? And I think as long as we keep that wheel turning, there's always going to be more things that we can do, especially as the generation starts to change.
I love that. I feel like that's a really good mantra for like admission professionals. What do they want and how can we help? Like those two things, you're in a beautiful space. All right, one more question here for the folks who are going to hang on with us for a couple extra minutes. Are there any tools or technology pieces that you all are using to aid in that personalization and authenticity piece? Jen, I know you were just talking, but I made Ellen start first time. So if you don't mind answering.
Yeah. So in terms of different tools that we use, I think we really leverage our CRM system. We use Slate at Binghamton. So it's a lot of time and effort to personalize messaging. So anytime that we can do survey forms or collect information through Slate, and then it automatically updates a student's record, and then they're automatically in our communication stream, and it pulls them based on certain interests. Anytime things can be automated, it takes a load off of us, which has been really helpful, I think, in some ways. And then the other piece in terms of tools I just wanted to touch briefly on is virtual components. You know, having such so at Binghamton, we have a very diverse student population. And in order to be able to represent the diverse student population, you have to be able to reach all of these students. And it's very important to understand that not all students can connect with us in the same way. So leveraging those virtual visits, those virtual tours, making it easier for students to get here, different things like that really play in as well, I think.
Love it. Ellen, what about you?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned previously that I started at Sussex in 2020, and the difference between the first 2 weeks I was there before we went into the pandemic and the rest of the time I was there was just unbelievable. The pandemic truly just kicked our butts and really made us take on a lot more technologies a lot quicker than I think we would have done otherwise. As with pretty much every other university, we adopted a lot more virtual technologies, things like Zoom and things like Unibuddy, so that we could make sure we were more accessible to an international audience and we were more accessible to those students that couldn't visit us. And we just haven't stopped using them because they make so much sense to keep using. And I think now that we're using those more and more, it's kind of given everyone the confidence to keep stepping into that zone where maybe they felt less comfortable before. So we use things like Canvas for our student ambassadors to help kind of share information quickly. We've worked with a company recently to set up our new events app as well, so that at big events we don't have a massive queue at 9 a.m. They can scan themselves in, they can check the times of their talks. I think as Jen said, anything you can automate, it takes off not only the pressure from us, but it takes off the pressure from guests, it takes off the pressure from student ambassadors. There's just no real downside to giving people at least the option to use those tools. So that's been our silver lining of the pandemic.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, all right, Amy/Emily/ whoever you are, I'm going to kick it back to you for some key takeaways. But Jen and Ellen, it was such a pleasure to chat with both of you. Thank you for answering all of those questions. I really appreciate it. And I know our attendees do too.
Yes, thank you both so much. Gosh, I wish we could just keep going with this conversation because I feel like there's so much more that we could learn from both of you and so many insights. I think I have to say my biggest takeaway today was Jen, the point that you made around social justice. And I think that's just so true. When a university stands up and says, this is who we are and this is what we believe in, and isn't afraid to stand up for something and just put it out there. I really feel like that resonates with younger people and especially this generation. I thought that was such an interesting point amongst many amazing tidbits that I've taken from both of you today. Now, I know we're a tiny bit over, so I'm going to make this quick. But I think generally speaking, you know, reflecting on our key takeaways from the session today, from the data side of it, and also from the conversation that we've had in the Q&A section, I think the first takeaway is just that authentic engagement every step of the way really matters, whether it's one-to-one interactions, whether it's community group chats, or whether it's unfiltered, honest, real content about all different aspects of the university experience. The second thing is refining the university or school's messaging and communications. And so being able to tailor by understanding what students want and understanding and accepting that that is always going to change and is always going to evolve. But the more that we can use data to understand that and to tap into that, the more control, the more power we have, and the more creative we can be with making that feel really unique to them. And then finally, unleashing the power of your community, you know, as Jen and Ellen have done really successfully and continue to do, looking around and recognizing what you have right in front of you, you know, your ambassadors, your students, your colleagues and staff, and also faculty that really help to bring the university to life and also can really bring students in and help them feel what it's like to be there day to day. And then best of all, you know, in terms of how we can support, of course, you know, I've got to end now with UniBuddy. We are here to provide expertise, and we can bring a lot of insights on authenticity and personalization, how you can use this in your marketing and recruitment efforts and activities while navigating student needs, and really just how to help you be more student centric if that's something that you would like to do. Funnily enough, we're very interested and passionate about that. So we'd love to talk about it for many, many hours with anyone who will listen to us and put their faith in us. And so I mentioned, you know, at the beginning of the session that we've got this report. If you would like to read that report, we're going to share a copy of that. You can download it, read through all the nitty-gritty details. And of course, if you'd like to know more about us and how we might be able to work with you and support you in elevating your student voice, all you need to do is reach out to us by email, and we'll of course take it from there. So that leaves me to say just a massive thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you so much, Jen and Ellen, for sharing your insights. Thanks everyone for attending, and have a great rest of your day wherever you are in the world.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye.